Muy buenos días a todos ustedes. Mi nombre es Aldo Parodi, soy el consejero comercial del Perú en Canadá y pues dirijo la oficina de Promperu en este país. Quiero saludar a mis compatriotas que están ahora en el Perú viendo este seminario, solamente para indicarles que de aquí en adelante lo vamos a hacer en idioma inglés, porque las presentaciones de nuestros invitados van a ser en ese idioma. Thank you very much, all of you, to be here in this seminar about doing business and public procurement from Canada. We are here with three guests. I would like to introduce Anouk Bergeron. Anouk Bergeron is the Commercial Counselor and Senior Trade Commissioner of Canada to Peru. So she belongs to the Global Affairs Ministry, which is similar to our Foreign Affairs Ministry. She will be doing the closing seminar. We also have Valérie Beillargeon. She's a Trade Policy Officer of Government Procurement for the Trade and Environment Division of Global Affairs Canada too. She will be explaining a brief overview of Canada's government procurement commitments under the Canada-Peru Free Trade Agreement. After her presentation, Mr. Meneslaos Argyropoulos, well known as Manny, he's the Chief of SME Stakeholder Engagement Office of Small and Medium Enterprises. He belongs to the Public Service and Procurement Ministry of Canada. He will be talking about how is the government procurement in Canada, an overview that will be very helpful to all of us to know how to do business with the Canadian government. All right, so I would like now to welcome Valérie to start to her presentation. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Valérie Beillargeon, and I'm a Trade Policy Officer in the Government Procurement Division at Global Affairs Canada. I'm very pleased to have this opportunity to provide you with a brief overview of the government procurement commitments that Canada is undertaking under the Canada-Peru Free Trade Agreement, a trade agreement that came into force almost 10 years ago. For today's presentation, I will first explain the structure of the government procurement chapter in the Canada-Peru FTA. I will then provide a high-level overview of the core obligations of the GP chapter. This will be followed by an examination of how we go about determining whether procurement is covered under the Canada-Peru government procurement chapter. And finally, I will conclude this presentation by providing you an overview of Canada's market access commitments under the Canada-Peru Free Trade Agreement. Like all of Canada's other FTAs, the government procurement chapter contains two sections, the procedural rules and the market access commitments. The procedural rules, which are laid out in the chapter text, explain the process that procuring entities or the purchasers must follow when they conduct procurements that are covered under the chapter. It's important to note that the procedural rules are based on the three core obligations: non-discrimination, transparency, and accountability, which I will go in further details in the next slide. As for market access commitments, these are all laid out in Annex 1401 of the Canada-Peru Free Trade Agreement. This annex lists the procurements that Canada and Peru have agreed will be subject to the procedural rules of the chapter. Later in the presentation, I will go over how the annex is organized. So the procedural rules in the Canada-Peru GP chapter aim to support the three core principles I just mentioned. The first one is non-discrimination. It essentially means that Canada must treat Peruvian goods, services, and suppliers the same way it treats its own domestic goods, services, and suppliers. In other words, a procuring entity cannot discriminate between Canadian and Peruvian suppliers for procurements that are covered under the Canada-Peru Free Trade Agreement. As for the transparency core obligations, it requires Canada and Peru to have in place clear rules and procedure to ensure the procurement process is transparent. For example, parties are obliged to ensure that information regarding contracting notices, tender documentation, award notices, and the laws related to government procurement are publicly available and accessible to all potential suppliers. The last core principle is accountability. It requires Canada and Peru to have in place administrative or judicial review procedures. They are also known as bid challenge mechanism, to give Canadian and Peruvian suppliers the ability to challenge any potential violation of the obligations in the GP chapter. In the next presentation from my colleague Manny, we will provide some additional details on Canada's bid challenge mechanism and the Canadian International Trade Tribunal. So now that we have talked about the procedural rules, let's discuss market access commitments. It's important to note that government procurement chapter in the Canada-Peru Free Trade Agreement doesn't apply to all government procurements. To determine whether a procurement opportunity in Canada is covered under the Canada-Peru government procurement chapter, you need to follow a four-step process. The first step is to determine whether the procuring entity, the purchasing authority, is covered. If the procuring entity is covered, then you need to determine whether the goods, service, or construction service being acquired is also covered. If both are covered, the procuring entity and the commodity, then you need to examine whether the monetary value of the procurement is equal or greater than the thresholds listed in Annex 14.01. Finally, the last step, you need to ensure that there is no exception from Canada's market access schedule that applies to the procurement. It's important for your information to note that as part of one of the transparency commitments, Canada and Peru have agreed to indicate in the notice of intended procurement or the request for proposal whether the procurement is covered under the Canada-Peru FTA. So you will see a little marker saying that this procurement is covered by the agreement. So as I mentioned earlier, Annex 14.01 of the Canada-Peru Free Trade Agreement laid out the procurements that Canada and Peru have agreed to cover. More specifically, the first two annexes list the entities that will be subject to procedures and obligation of the GP chapter. Canada covers essentially most of its central government departments and agencies, and a list of 10 other entities. In Canada, we call them crown corporations. They are also called SOEs. So we list 10 under the Canada-Peru Free Trade Agreement. Annex 3, 4, 5 set out the covered goods, services, and construction services. Overall, Canada covers all goods procured by listed entities, with the exception of the Department of National Defense, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, and Canadian Coast Guard, for which a specific list of goods applies, and those goods are listed under the Annex 3. As it relates to the service, Canada only covered the services that are not listed in the agreement and covers all construction services that are classified in Division 51 of the UNCPC. Basically, it's pretty much all construction services with certain exceptions. Finally, the general notes, the 6th section of the Annex 1401 includes important qualifications to the coverage accorded under the GP chapter. It lists specific exclusion from the procurement coverage. For example, we have a well-known exclusion in Canada for Indigenous businesses. So we have the ability to set aside certain procurement for that community. The last part of Annex 1401 establishes the monetary thresholds to which the value of the procurement must be equal to or greater than to be covered. As you can see on the screen, the thresholds vary depending on the level or the type of government entity that is doing the procurement and the type of commodity being purchased, whether it's a good, a service, or a construction service. So for example, goods and services procured by Public Services Canada to be covered must be equal to or over 173,900 Canadian dollars. The values in Canadian dollars are readjusted every 2 years based on an adjustment formula. And the new thresholds values are published every January 1st of even numbered year on the website of the Treasury Board of Canada Secretariat. This is all for me, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you have after my colleague presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Valerie. So now we will have Menelaos from the Public Service and Procurement Canada.
Thank you very much, Aldo, and team, for the invite to speak to your members here today, your businesses from Peru. My name is Menelaos Manny-Argyropoulos, and I'm the Chief of SME Stakeholder Engagement with the Office of Small and Medium Enterprises out of the Ontario office. We're an outreach and engagement office for Public Services and Procurement Canada. We do a lot of awareness and information sharing to businesses all across Canada and international businesses like yourselves here today. My colleague has just laid out the framework and the context of the free trade agreement between Canada and Peru and what the stipulations are for getting involved. My role here today will be to give you a little bit of a guide as to how the process works, what you need to consider, who buys and why we buy within the Government of Canada, and then how you can start to get involved with us in doing business. So my presentation will go through the following: just a quick overview of what our office does and our role. I gave you some of that already, but I'll explain a few more things about our mandate. Then we'll touch base with regards to public procurement in Canada, who the main players are. Essentially, you heard Valerie mention that there's some central agencies that do procurement. The main central agency, of course, is Public Services and Procurement Canada. That's the one that we work for, that I work for. And then there's 104 others that can also purchase goods, services, and construction on their own. And then how the government procurement of goods happens, like how we post for contracts, where we post, how you can search and find them, leading us to the main procurement website called Buyandsell.gc.ca, currently the authoritative source for doing business with the Government of Canada and our tenders. And then we will talk a little bit about our new electronic procurement solution that we're transitioning into, that will replace Buyandsell over the next year or two, a purely electronic solution where everything will be posted online and transactions will be happening online. So without further ado, our office was created in 2005 out of a need to make the federal procurement process here in Canada more open, fair, transparent, and accessible to all businesses, a more inclusive system. We are also a twofold mandate. The other one is to try and reduce barriers. You can see right in our name, our focus is on small and medium enterprises. And by definition, we use our Industry Canada, now Innovation, Science and Economic Development Canada's definition for business size based on employees. So if you are a sole proprietor with one employee up to four business, then you're a micro business. If you are up to 99 employees, you're considered small. 100 to 499 is considered medium, and then above 500 is a large organization or company. Now, we don't discriminate against anyone, obviously. We help anyone that's wanting to learn more about how to get involved with federal procurement. Even large companies come to us to get some guidance and assistance and clarity on some of the procedures, because ultimately, everybody needs to follow the same rules and guidelines that govern how we do procurement. This is how we keep a fair and accessible procurement system for everyone. Now, the trade agreement that was introduced by Valerie plays a pivotal part in how you can get involved in federal procurement. There are a variety of different tools that are available through our office that can help guide businesses more. So, for example, we have regular business seminars, like now offered by webinar because of COVID. They used to be in person, but everything seems to have transitioned to a virtual world now. So you're welcome to look onto Buyandsell, look at our events calendar and see what seminars are coming up. The fundamentals is the Doing Business with the Government of Canada session. That is what I'm giving you a little bit of an overview here today, but it's essentially a 2-hour session in our region, in Ontario region. This happens the first. External businesses can take this as well. It's provided over WebEx, and then it's very informative and contextual and puts things into perspective. Also, businesses that are looking to do business with Canada need to kind of get acclimated. We have a national info line called the national info line. Actually, it's a 1-800 number, 811-1148. This one will get you access and guidance in regards to registration, the buy and sell website assistance, but we also have a regional contact in Toronto, 1-800 number 668-5378 that you can access, and our Aunt OSME mailbox is there for all to send us emails or if you have inquiries regarding anything to do with federal procurement. As I mentioned, Buy and Sell is the authoritative source currently, but we are moving to a more stable and online type of platform, an electronic procurement solution using SAP Ariba, and we'll talk about that at the tail end of this presentation. So I'm going to go for about another half an hour trying to go over some examples for you, some things that most businesses need to consider when they're doing business with Canada. So some of the information to kind of get you a little bit more acclimated so that you could understand the scope of public procurement in Canada. It's estimated that in Canada, public procurement does in excess of about $200 billion Canadian annually. So that includes the federal government, but it also includes the larger, the more lower tier governments that we have, like provinces, territories, regions, and local municipalities, and even smaller entities like school boards, hospital groups, and the like. And altogether, those lower tier governments have a larger buying capacity and power than what we have at the federal government. But within the federal government, we do a lot of business on our own. You can see there about $23 billion annually is spent by the government of Canada on our needs to keep our operations running within the government of Canada. The diagram down below shows you the big purple pie is the lower tier governments. As I mentioned, they're known as the MASH sector. The municipalities, academic institutions, school boards, and hospitals. Of course, there's so many more of these across Canada, so they make a larger buying power, but they also, because of that, also buy a lot of goods, services, and construction. The federal government represents about 15%, and then the territories and provinces about an equal amount. Just some context so you understand, obviously, in the world that we live in now, the 23 billion will probably be far exceeded this fiscal year that just passed, obviously, with all of the purchases that are being made by the government of Canada on behalf of Canada for the fight against COVID. That number is going to be quite large this year, but on average about 20 to 25 billion dollars. Now, some of the procurement principles that govern how we do procurement is important to understand as well, because as I alluded to earlier, we want to achieve and put into place a very open, fair, and transparent system. One that's based on laws and regulations that govern how we do these procurements. And our procurement people and staff are governed by those. And that's why it gets a little bit complicated sometimes. Now, prior to the existence of OSME in 2005, it was quite cumbersome to do business with the government of Canada. Very large documents, comprehensive documents, legal documents. A lot of businesses, including small businesses, didn't have the capacity to read through all of that legal documentation. So the office has streamlined things and pushed our procurement team to become more modern. So we've tried to make it more open, more fair by introducing plain text documents, for example, reducing other barriers for competition, making plain text documents accessible online without charge, without a registration through our government electronic tendering service known as Buyandsell, which launched in 2010. And then we introduced the tender system in 2013. So we're continuously trying to improve the system to make it more inclusive. And recently, over the last several years, our focus has been a lot more on underrepresented groups within our procurements to allow more access to women-owned businesses, minority groups, cultural or racialized groups to get access to these government contracts. You heard my colleague Valerie mentioned there is one set aside. There's only one set aside in Canada currently, and that is with the procurement strategy for Aboriginal business. We have an obligation to let out certain procurements only to Indigenous businesses in Canada first. Should we not be able to find a business through that, then we would run a regular procurement. Now, there's a lot of other things the office has done, and one of them is introduced the new Canadian Collaborative Procurement Initiative, which also has an international component to it. Our colleagues are continuously working with international governments to learn best practices and to also open up the trade routes and access the markets, both for your businesses as well as for Canadian companies, and our colleagues at Global Affairs are the conduit for that as well. So just a little bit more about our principles and how we do business, and how you should understand who the players are within the government of Canada. Now, obviously, trade agreements play a really pivotal part in determining how you can get involved. And you heard Valerie lay it out with the schedule earlier. This is just another snapshot of that same schedule in chart format based on the Canada-Peru Free Trade Agreement. When it comes to the main government departments and agencies, those 100 or so agencies and departments, including Public Services and Procurement Canada, Health Canada, Environment, Climate Change Canada, all of these departments, anything that has the Department of, like National Defense, would be included under this segment. And then those other 10 Crown corporations and agencies and other government groups that Valerie mentioned, Crown corporations like Canada Post Corporation or others, those would be the limits, the lower tier limits, thresholds that need to be exceeded in order for the Canada-Peru agreement to be implemented. So in excess of 173,900 for goods, you would likely see a procurement posted on Buyandsell currently, eventually on EPS. That would indicate that it's accessible by Peruvian companies because it exceeds that amount. In regards to the Canada Free Trade Agreement, which is a trade agreement that we have internally against all the provinces that take part in that in Canada, if it exceeds $26,400, it would be posted openly to allow businesses across Canada to compete for that. So trade agreements play a pivotal part in what we do and how we do procurement and when we can do it. So keep that in mind. So it would be very easy for Peruvian companies to search for these opportunities on Buyandsell. Again, it's an open source platform, and there's searchable queries that you could just put in keyword Peru for active tenders, and then see what is available for Peruvian companies, because any mention of the Canada-Peru Free Trade Agreement must be put into the solicitation document, as Valerie alluded. And if so, then you can search for that or those opportunities and set up email notifications for yourselves as well. So some of the things that we use that are known as mechanisms or methods of supply that the government of Canada uses to procure goods, services, and construction must also be understood, because it could vary. So a lot of businesses that we deal here in Canada have a misconception out there that we always award contracts based on lowest price. It doesn't make a difference of what your technical merit is. We're just going to give it to the lowest price bidder. And that is a misconception out there that the Canadian business have, but maybe international businesses have as well. As I said, we follow the guidelines and rules and laws in Canada for federal procurement and adhere to those strictly. So some of the mechanisms we use, for example, an invitation to tender or even a request for quotation, price is the determining factor. But even so, we will do our due diligence to try and have suppliers meet certain technical merit, what we call must-haves, in order to proceed to then be evaluated on price. So this is called lowest price prevails. You use it for construction type or contracts. If I have a job, I invite company A or Aldo's company B or company C, and I say, you're invited to tender for this job. Please provide me your pricing, but make sure that you meet these conditions. So if there's 5 conditions, you need to get a check mark in each of the mandatories in order then to be considered for your pricing. If you don't have one of the certifications or licenses, you're not going to be included. You may have had the best price, but you won't be looked at because you didn't meet the mandatory. So keep that in mind. Those are the simple, non-complex type procurements. Must-haves are met, and then away you go. Pricing will determine the lowest price. Now, Canada is using more and more pre-qualification methods of supply, known as standing offers and supply arrangements. Standing offers are mechanisms where we can determine fixed price, a widget, $10 per widget. I need those widgets, and I'll buy them often and in bulk and in large quantities. I'm not going to go out every week or every month when I need one, do a regular procurement, which could take 2, 4, 6 weeks to submit, get quotes, evaluate, costs a lot of taxpayers' money to do that. What we say is, here's a solicitation, a standing offer. Should you be able to provide the goods that we're looking for or services, that's a standing offer, and we can determine fixed price. You need to submit a proposal telling us how you meet the technical merit and then provide us your fixed pricing in order to qualify. So when you're in the system and you qualify, you're equally qualified with others. Now, depending how much you qualified or what you scored on your qualification could determine where you sit in the standing offer and whether you get called first before others. So these are standing offers that are put in place as only to qualify suppliers, to have them ready when we need them, so we can quickly turn around and set up an order, what is known as a call-up against a standing offer, to then call up one of the technical qualified suppliers that's on the list, that's maybe top or second or third or fifth. It all depends on who's awarded contracts previously. You refill this order for $200,000. If you say you can do it, we'll award that call-up for you, and you would fill that order before a certain time. You would invoice us and we would pay you. But first you have to be qualified in that method of supply called the standing offer. Supply arrangements are similar. Again, a technical qualification is required by a company to technically qualify. Here, fixed price cannot be determined, so we use ceiling rates up to a certain dollar value amount, like $100, $150 per hour for a service. These are for things where fixed price cannot be determined. But instead of a call up against a standing offer, here what we do is we pre-qualify you, have you ready and waiting. If a requirement comes up, what you will then be able to do is you're invited, depending on the dollar value amount. So for example, some of the supply arrangements we have, like for task-based informatics professional services, which is an IT category method of supply, we would invite up to 15 or 20 suppliers for opportunities in the tier 1 environment, which is up to $3.75 million. And only those 15 or 20 will be allowed to then submit pricing back, and they would be notified electronically through what is known as the centralized professional services portal. If it exceeds the $3.75 million threshold, then everyone in that category, whether there was 100 or 15 or 70, everybody get a chance to bid on it. If it's tier 1, 15 or 20 out of maybe 60 or 100 are invited. And there's a formula for who gets invited. It's imperative that anyone that's looking to qualify for any of these or bid on any solicitations with the Government of Canada to truly read the solicitation documents that are posted. All of the terms and conditions and requirements that you need to qualify for are on that document. If you have questions, unfortunately, the only authority that you can ask those questions to, technically speaking, is the technical authority or the contract authority that's on the document, and each of our documents has that. Because it's an active tender, you can't come to Manny and say, hey, Manny, you know what, this supply arrangement is good for me. I'm thinking of doing this, this, and this. Would I be able to submit this? Manny can't say anything back because I'm not the authority. If I give you any information, it's a bias. It could get you in trouble. It could get me into trouble. You would then look to find that contract authority, and you have a timeline in the solicitation where question period is open, and then it closes the last week or so to allow that contract authority to post an amendment with all of the answers, and then everybody sees all the questions and the answers, and then you can respond back to that proposal comfortably. The most commonly used method of supply is the request for proposal method. It's an open competition. It's subject to trade agreements. Peruvian companies would bid on this just like Canadian or other international governments or businesses if the trade agreements impact other jurisdictions. And then you would be competing openly against all of those companies for that solicitation. Scoring and your pricing would be awarded these contracts. And in most cases, this is known as best value to the crown. So a combination of technical merit and pricing will determine it. Sometimes we might weigh it more on the technical merit and less on the price. Some of them may be 60-40, some of them may be 80-20. You really need to look into what the requirements are for each solicitation, as each one is unique. When it boils down to it, essentially, it's all about demand and supply. The Government of Canada has operational needs, which is the demand. We have certain obligations and commitments through trade agreements that impact who can bid on our contracts or who can compete on our contracts. Once their supply rules are identified, those companies that are capable will then respond back by proposal or technical response to qualify or to compete and win those contracts. That's how procurement is done in Canada. Now, I'm going to spend a couple of minutes here. I'm going to flip back and forth from my presentation to the live site. Buyandsell is the authoritative source right now. A lot of useful information in this website currently. We are transitioning to Canada Buys, as you see here. Right now, very user-friendly, accessible format. Most commonly used services are up on top of the page. So for example, finding tenders is right up at the top. You can see here how to get started with tenders is next. Finding policies and guidelines. What are your goods and services? Finding PWGSC related contracts, et cetera, et cetera. And on the right-hand side here is all information that can give you some guidance in doing work with Canada. So for example here, Valerie mentioned a little bit about what you can do in order to challenge, or if you have concerns with a certain procurement, you think that it's, it wasn't done fairly. There's recourse mechanisms, there's links right here, bid challenge mechanisms, dispute resolutions, and also federal fraud tip line if you're suspecting fraud. The main ones, as Valerie mentioned, is the Office of the Procurement Ombudsman. Based on certain types of procurements and dollar value amounts, you can reach out to the Ombudsman's office to do a review of the situation. Now, they're not going to resolve anything, like, and then have a procurement overturned, but they will come up with recommendations which could entail some type of an action. When you really want to challenge and think that something is wrong and has been done wrong, the Canadian International Trade Tribunal is the quasi-judicial body where it's like a court. You challenge Canada because you feel this contract was done wrong or you were done wrong. Then you have your legal counsel, we bring our legal counsel, and it's like a court case. However, on the more positive side, there's a lot of news in here, and here's the event schedule that I mentioned earlier. Now, in order to really get acclimated for businesses, we strongly urge you to go to Buyandsell. It's a very user-friendly environment as well. It was established, the tender site was established in 2013, no registration, open source, searchable, just like Google, Yahoo, Bing, all of those search mechanisms. You put in some wording in here, hit the search button, and then anything related to that term is searched against the procurement site, and then that information is pulled out. This is important, especially when you're looking for tenders. And we'll walk you through a couple of tender opportunities in a few seconds. So when you're in Buyandsell, the other thing that all businesses need to understand currently right now is that the Government of Canada uses a unique classification coding system called Goods and Services Identification Number. So this widget that I mentioned earlier, services, consulting services, all have this unique code. It's hard to tell on here, but I'll show you an example in a few minutes. It's tied to whatever your the supply is, okay? It could be a goods, services, or construction. So goods and services identification is what Canada uses currently. When we migrate over to the new electronic procurement solution, the GSIN codes will also be replaced. These will be then replaced by what are known as the United Nations Standards Products and Services Codes, UNSPSC codes. Some procurements may also have the North American Classification Coding System, NAICS codes. So it's incumbent upon the businesses to really get acclimated within whatever the system is to properly find their marketplace. And by marketplace, I mean, what are the GSINs? What are the NAICS codes? What are the UNSPSC codes? Because once you determine what space you're in, then you can search to find out how active or large a marketplace it really is. Sorry about that. So that's what I needed to say. So Buyandsell is open source, free access, no registration. All of our tenders are posted on there, easily shareable through social media channels. It's essentially copy and paste a link. Let's say this is something that I found. I can copy this link and send it off to my colleagues or my partners and say, I want to bid on this. So if we spend a couple of seconds on here, most individuals, most businesses that are looking to find contracts for themselves will do one of two things. Come to Buyandsell tenders and do a keyword search on something like food or architectural services or whatever the condition or terms are in. So if I go to food, for example, and I hit search, you see here 22,725 records with the term food in it. A lot of it is sometimes useless to me. But on the left-hand side, procurement data allows you to narrow down your search parameters. Remember I said goods and services identification numbers are important? So I found 108 related to food. If I click on that, it breaks it down to 108 only in my search now. So food services, is that what I do? Maybe. Do I supply live animals not raised for food, just for lab equipment or lab rats or that kind of stuff? Maybe it's that. The GSIN code for that is this. You want to find a GSIN code that has a commodity group underneath it as well, procurement division code, because then it'll tell you that it's actually possibly active. So you would search through all of these and determine which one, like this, dairy, food, and eggs. If that's what you do, and you want to supply the Government of Canada, if we're ever going out for dairy, food, and eggs, 8910 is the classification GSIN code for that category. I can then easily go back to here, put in that keyword search or the GSIN code. Normally a GSIN code is an alphanumeric code, which will help you in your searching. Instead of food, you would put on here 8910 and then do a search, okay? And then the search would pull out all of those relevant GSIN codes for those commodities. Now, what I really wanted to show you is how Peruvian companies can search and find opportunities based on the trade agreements that will allow you then to submit a proposal back to us. So I would start with active. Click on the active icon here. It's found that there's currently 692 relevant active tenders within the government of Canada. Now, the other thing you can start to think about is if you find an active tender right now, and it's a search that you're comfortable and you're happy with, like if you searched and you found like G009H medical advisory services is what you want to do, and there's a request for proposal for that, well, search for that parameter, and then you can click on this email icon notification, and it will then allow you to put in an email notification, and then whatever you search for and you liked in your search will be captured here. You answer the capture question and you submit it, and then it creates an email notification for you that anytime that GSIN code, which is G009H that you found, that is your area or your marketplace, anytime there's something new, you will be notified right away. So you make the system work for you. So what I wanted to show you is a search based on Peru, because as I mentioned, if it's a contract that's subject to the trade agreement, it would have Canada-Peru trade agreement in there, like Canadian or Canada-Colombia, Canada-Korea. You can search for these keywords. So if I search for Peru under active tenders, I found 271 records of the term Peru that are listed here for active tenders. Now, a lot of these may be open tenders. You want to look for something that's called request for proposal. If it's a request for proposal, that means that here, for example, this one here, cemetery maintenance services in British Columbia for Veterans Affairs. It's a request for proposal. If I click on here, this indicates this is how you would see a proposal. You get some information associated to this tender on here. It says it's closing in 3 weeks, 4 days from now on the 28th of June. It's for JX9930 Memorial Cemeterial Monetary Equipment and Supply Repair for Veterans Affairs. If you click on the show more, you can see here the trade agreements that are impacted. And right off the bat, it says Canada-Peru Free Trade Agreement is subject to this. So Peruvian companies, if they fall under this category, can look to apply to this particular opportunity. You can see here that currently 180 views in the English and 107 in the French have gone. And here's the area of coverage. Now you can see a lot more in the abstract, but most importantly, when you scroll down to the bottom, these are the important documents that you need to find. And these are all PDF, both in English and French. The 000 are the main ones. The other ones are amendments. And the amendments are equally as important to the original documents, because there might be announcements in amendment number 1 that changes the terms and conditions of something of the actual solicitation, in which case you need to download all the documents, review them, and then respond to the most current one. So if I were to click on this one, for example, you'll see here that Veterans Affairs is doing this contract. If it was in excess of $3.75 million for services, the look and feel of this document would be Public Services and Procurement Canada. Because as a central government agency, our minister for Public Services and Procurement Canada has the highest delegated authority to do purchases on behalf of Canada. There's 104 other government departments and agencies. We mentioned them earlier, like Health Canada, Environment, Climate Change Canada, Veterans Affairs Canada, for example. They can procure goods, services, and construction up to certain dollar value amounts. Now, this service contract will not exceed Veterans Affairs threshold of $3.75 million for services, or if it's for goods less than $25,000 or construction less than $400,000, it has their look and feel. But if it was in excess of that, Veterans Affairs, no matter how much they wanted to do this on their own, could not do it on their own. They have to come to Public Services and Procurement Canada and request PSPC to handle this procurement, because our minister would then need to buy the goods or services that they're looking for, because their minister won't have that authority. It's important to understand that, because you might see different documentation. And you could also use that as a guide, because if it's PSPC, we're either buying it for ourselves or on behalf of another department. And in the document, it would say, plus also in the description of what's happening. So this is a request for proposal. If you need to submit, you need to review all of the standard instructions. Everything that you need to know is in this document, and all our documents are set up similarly. Even though they're all unique, they have certain terms and conditions that need to be reviewed thoroughly by everybody in order to submit. The zones that you're going to be responsible for. This is a phase biz applied, so it could be in 2 stages. And then standard instructions, clauses, and conditions. I don't have a lot of time here today, but you really need to review all of this, plus all of the annexes that are at the bottom that usually are the statement of work that you need to then adhere to all of the terms and conditions and how you can get involved in responding to this proposal. See, there's recourse mechanisms. It tells you right here how you can do that. So here's your bid preparation instructions. 1 technical bid, 2 financial bid, certifications that you're going to require, and any additional information. So you go through the bidder instruction, follow the instructions thoroughly. You need to be compliant in various certifications. If you're not technically qualified in any areas, you'll know that you're not going to be compliant, so don't even apply. So just some things for consideration. As I mentioned, I don't have a lot of time to go through it all, but that is how you would search and find Peruvian type opportunities. Now, moving forward, if you want to start, Public Services and Procurement Canada has a data set called Supplier Registration Information Database, or it's a system. You need to be registered in Canada as a business though first in order to register for this company. International companies can also look to register in our SRI. However, these would be for opportunities below the thresholds, and only if items are not covered in the trade agreements would they be able to get involved. What this entails is a registration of a business. You put in your information, your legal name if you have one in Canada, and that Canada Revenue Agency business number or 9-digit number that you have would then be linked to your account here. But instead of RT001, it would be PG001, and then you would be able to select all of the different types of opportunities on low dollar. Then you might be sourced out to then provide pricing. Okay, it's mostly used by PSPC for low dollar goods under 25,000 or 40,000 for services. But it's also important because if you ever bidding on a Public Service Procurement Canada procurement and you win it, you're going to need to have a procurement business number. So they're going to ask you to then get that. So if you go into the SRI and you're from Peru, there's a link that says international companies. You click on the international company link and it'll take you to the closest Canada Revenue Agency office that's suited for Peruvian companies. And then you would have to call and talk to Canada Revenue Agency about how to set up a business in Canada in order to get involved in federal procurement with the government of Canada for these opportunities. If it's purely competitive over the thresholds for the trade agreements, you don't need to be in the system. You can just submit your proposal. If you win, then we deal with you as an international company. Now, some of the areas that are covered that we see a lot of Peruvian companies getting involved in is under the professional services categories. And these are some of the most common types of professional services that the government of Canada uses. Informatics professional services, and you see them listed here. There's a lot of them, and we do a complete seminar just on professional services, 2 hours. I encourage you to get involved in learning more about that. Some are based on task-based professional services. So I have a task, I need something to be done. I will source out suppliers from those qualifications to then award a contract to do that task. It could be for 2 junior architects and 3 senior architects. If you're qualified and you have your best pricing, I could award you a contract to do that task or those tasks. Or it could be solutions-based. Solutions meaning the government has some need. We can't do it in-house. We need a complete cradle-to-grave solution. So we qualify businesses under these categories when we need them to provide us a complete solution for the government of Canada. So if you meet those solution-based professional services areas, you may look to qualify under the solutions-based informatics professional services. So here's some of the areas. So tasks and solutions are all the non-IT category areas. There's about 5 or 6 streams, maybe about 60 or so categories under non-IT. And then these are just some of them. And then the task-based informatics professional services, mostly for the task-based IT-related categories, and they include things like all of these categories here. There's about 90 professional services categories, as I mentioned, quite a bit. So you would need to first qualify here in order to be considered for some of these opportunities. And then if you are qualified, you're one of those companies that is qualified, only those companies would be invited then to price. If you wanted to get access to those contracts, and you see some of them here when I went to notice of proposed procurements and stuff, when they were listed on here. This one was an RFP, but some of the other ones here listed request for proposals. These are RFQs. Here, notice of proposed procurement. You see this, it's looking for technical writers, junior, 1 senior. So these would be only for companies that qualified in those categories that would be able to bid. Nobody else can bid if you weren't qualified on it. So just know how that works. Just to keep the presentation going, these are the solutions-based informatics professional services that we talked about. There's a supply arrangement. You'll get a copy of this deck. We'll share it with you, and you can have access to the links. Some of the solutions: business transformation, electronic service delivery, information management and business intelligence, security management, IT systems. This is where we're going to say, yeah, I have a problem, solve it for me. What's your solution? Companies would then write their proposals, price us, and then we would determine which one is best, and we'll go with that solution. This is a very large type of contract in the millions and millions of dollars, mostly for opportunities. Just some examples. At your leisure, you can go and click on the link, and it'll give you this example that was part of the presentation. I didn't show it, but it's accessible to you. I already explained how you can set up your email notifications. Post-award, these are your recourse mechanisms. As I mentioned, if you feel you've been wrong, the ultimate level is the CITT. Often enough, things get answered and mediated very easily. As soon as you are excluded from a competition, you're found non-compliant, you have a right to ask for a debrief, a post-award debrief with the contracting authority. You write to them an email and say, can you explain why I didn't qualify, where I went wrong? So they're not going to tell you how you compared with others, but they're going to tell you, hey, you know what, Manny? You didn't have this certification, so we excluded you because of this. We asked you for your master's degree and you didn't have it. So then you say, oh, okay, if I didn't have that, I understand. Then the next time you go in, you look at the must-haves and it says masters. If you have it, you include it. Otherwise, you don't apply because you'll be found non-compliant. So this is how you can learn from things. Now, all of our awarded contracts are posted on Buyandsell afterwards or in the open data website. And from there, you can determine how active a marketplace it is, who are some of our suppliers that are supplying us right now, because sometimes it's too competitive and some of the businesses that are getting involved or can't get involved in some of the larger contracts. So there's a lot of partnerships or subcontracting opportunities that are possible, or indirect ways to supply Government of Canada through some of these existing contract holders. So that's an opportunity for you to get involved as well. Often enough, depending on the type of work, if you're delivering goods using our facilities or our material or our documents, you'll be subject to security clearances. Now, the Contractor Security Program within Public Services Procurement Canada issues contractor security for Canadian federal contracts. However, for Peruvian businesses, you need to follow certain conditions, and there's authorities within your government's organization that are responsible for contractor security. There's a link here, and you can gain access to some of those details of how you can do that. So I come to the point in the presentation where we're almost wrapping up, but I wanted to just overarchingly describe what I just mentioned. Canada is a large marketplace for a lot of businesses, both domestic, both international opportunities as well. We've put into place federal trade agreements that are opening the trade routes between countries. The Canada-Peru Free Trade Agreement was articulated by Valerie, and the terms and conditions are there. Peruvian companies have rights to do business in Canada, just like Canadian businesses have rights to do business in Peru. Our methods of supply are such that they're competitive, they're open, fair, and transparent. You can search and find Peruvian opportunities based on the Canada-Peru Free Trade Agreement information that's posted in all of our solicitations through buy and sell. We allow companies to compete for contracts, sometimes based on lowest price only, or often enough, when it's a request for proposal, a combination of both technical merit and pricing to give best value to Canada. But also we technically qualify suppliers. So you may be on a technical qualification, but never win a contract. You need to determine and make a business decision whether it's worthwhile for you to be in there. You might be in a standing offer where you're 12th on the list, but only the top 5 are seeming to get the contracts. Maybe there's not a lot of activity, but by rule, we have to go to those contract holders first before we go to others. So if you're finding yourself out of the mix, you may want to jump back out, requalify, and be more competitive on your pricing to see if you can technically score better or get a better price. And then you might be on top of the list or very high to the top. So a variety of different ways of how to get involved. This has all been done through our government electronic tender portal, through buy and sell, but we're now transitioning over to canadabuys.canada.ca. And I'm going to spend the last few minutes here just going over the Canada Buys website. I have the, how do I get over to the, oh, here it is. Apologies for that, I have that bar that keeps popping in from the top. So when you land on the Canada Buys website, it looks like this. Right now, it's just becoming more robust. It's kind of a framework. It's accessible. It gives you some directions, and it's a portal into what is known as SAP Ariba. Other jurisdictions around the world, even domestic jurisdictions, governments are using SAP Ariba. So Canada's adopted a similar principle and system, and we're going to go with SAP Ariba for our new government electronic tendering service. In order for Peruvian companies to access EPS or Canadian contracts in the future, instead of going to buy and sell, currently you can still go to buy and sell, do your searches, find them. Even if they're in EPS, they would first be listed on buy and sell, and then you would then have to go to EPS. Eventually, when the transition happens, first the transition is happening only for public services and Procurement Canada's contracts, things that we do in PSPC. Other government departments will then be migrated over the next year or two, and eventually all Government of Canada tenders will be posted on here, and this will become the authoritative source. In order for you to get started, you can go in there right now, go through the website. If you click on Get Started, you'll be prompted to look into what the requirements are in order to get an account. You need to fulfill the requirements of getting an account in order to then start searching and finding. Searching and finding or creating an account just to find Government of Canada tenders is free. There's no cost associated with it. And then there's another account that would need to be created or enhance your current account if you're actually downloading tenders from the Government of Canada. It needs a financial information, because obviously if you're ever going to win a contract, everything's going to be done through SAP Ariba. So the transactional information will need to be updated on your account, which then brings up the account to a higher level. So currently, though, it's an accessible platform. You can register for an overview, look to get a seminar or webinar from the group that's managing EPS. Most of the important stuff is getting started. You see here, they have a link to the CRA website as well, so that you can look to get a business number. If you want, you need to get a business number. So getting started on SAP Ariba, just use the checklist. It's a pretty good guide. If you go down through here, it was posted on March the 13th. Read the instructions. That's the one thing with government. We have a lot of information. We want to make certain everybody understands things equally, so we post a lot of information. So here's what you'll need: basic information like your company name, your street address, city, province, postal code, and country. Further, the main user's information. Then a little bit about the company profile, a description, and then you have to answer certain business questions associated with you. Eventually, you're going to be needing to provide a financial information section. So in the process of finalizing contract with PSPC, you must enter this next set of information if you get to this stage. Okay, if you don't ever get to this stage, then you won't need it. But essentially, you'll need to put your CRA ownership, your bank name, bank address, so for payments and such, as I alluded to earlier. At this point, I just wanted to really introduce you to the fact that this is happening. It's not as important to go into it and to show you the platform or the environment. Suffice to say that eventually this will be the landing and the government's electronic tendering service moving forward, and that you will need to get more acclimated in this. Currently, EPS team is doing a lot of the training. Eventually, our offices are going to begin to provide training and assistance for businesses as well. And then we can take you in a little bit further. So you can go into your account access, set up your account, and then show you how you can search and find those opportunities. Just jump back into my website presentation. So with that, I conclude. I hope I've given you a little bit of a better picture of what's happening within the government of Canada. What are some of the processes and mechanisms, knowing that you're competing openly, sometimes internationally, sometimes against only Canadian companies. However, it is competitive. And when things are competitive, there's a lot of losers and only one winner most of the time. So either you look to compete on your own, or you look to partner with organizations as subcontractors, and there's a lot of opportunities to do that as well. One of the last things I didn't show you, and I'll try to show you, is anything that we have for any of our contracts in buy and sell. There's a self-identification link that's available here that you can self-identify yourself for subcontracting opportunities. This company, if you're interested in this, you can post your name on here and it'll say, hey, you know what? I'm available. If others are interested, I would like to subcontract. And maybe others are looking for subs as well to kind of put together a larger proposal. So that's how you can self-identify yourself as well. This one doesn't have any. Our information is here. Our contact information is here. Our trade commissioner's offices are found in your country. You can reach out to them as well. You can reach out to Aldo and team. They do a great job at Promperu. And thank you for the time here today. We can take questions.
Thank you, Manny and Valerie, for this comprehensive presentation. We do have some questions, but before going in those questions, perhaps with all this information, what would you say will be the 1, 2, 3 for a company that wants to participate in those public tender? What would be the first steps? I understand that you are transitioning a website from buy and sell to Canada Buy, but to simplify the process for a Peruvian company that want to do business with the Canadian government, what will be the first, second, and third steps?
Okay. So for any Peruvian company right now, they have to determine if they're going to be competing openly for those opportunities that are in excess of the trade agreement thresholds. So in which case, the very first step they should do is go to buy and sell, do their searches to find opportunities that are currently active that they can then fulfill. The first step within that is to find the GSIN codes associated to their marketplace. What can they supply? It could be GSIN code ABC123. It could be XYZ7878. If they can supply those two GSIN codes, they then have their marketplace. They can then go into buy and sell, do some keyword searches to see how active a marketplace it is and who's involved, what departments are buying. Because if they go in and they see that Canada's only buying very small amounts in that area, chances are it's not very active. So there may not be a lot of opportunities. But if they're seeing a lot of activity, then they need to determine and decide, can I get involved? How do I get involved? They can then search to see if there's any standing offers or supply arrangements where they technically need to qualify, or do they just respond to requests for proposals? And they can be listed right on buy and sell tenders, just like I showed you earlier.
So they
right
enter into the buy and sell GC Canada. They do the search. I can be interested in that in that tender. So and then the Peruvian company, as I understood, they have 2 ways to participate. One, as an international company, right?
Yes.
So in that case, Peruvian company wouldn't need to register under the SRI. I am correct?
That's correct. It would just be their business number in Peru. They would win a contract, we would invoice, and we would pay.
So Peruvian
it's
companies
for other
can participate as international companies without registering into the Canadian business assistant. Now, what would be the advantage for a Peruvian company, if there is any, to register as a business in Canada with the SRI?
Very good question. So on that, then this opens up additional opportunities because they would be seen as an entity in Canada because they would be issued a Canada Revenue Agency business number, and then they would be treated as a Canadian business. That would open up all of the other opportunities for them that are outside of the trade agreement threshold. So low dollar opportunities for goods, low dollar for services, et cetera, et cetera. So that's where that comes in, because then you have a Canada Revenue Agency business number. That's where you talk to Canada Revenue.
So, yes, and and that's why there is a question from Gino in the chat room. He says, the question is, we need to have a partner company or our own company in Canada in order to participate in the government process. That's his question.
Yeah, it's a very good question. I think it's a question that's better suited for Canada Revenue Agency to answer, because it's the way that they set up the business in Canada that will allow them to then be provided with access to different things. If it's a PO box and there's nobody there, I don't know if the Canada Revenue Agency will give you a business number for that, but I think they have to have a presence somewhere in Canada in order to get that. So don't quote me on that, but that's where you have to speak with the taxation office that's suited for Peru. And I can show you if you go to for business. Oh, I'm not sharing my screen right now.
But in fact, the answer is your first answer, right? So the Peruvian company, they don't need to register as Canada business in order to participate in those international biddings if the bid is under the trade agreement Canada-Peru, right?
Yes, those are competitive open tenders between the countries, and they're available to any business in Peru to bid on.
Yes.
Should they be awarded the contract, then the contract would be with the Peruvian company to deliver those goods or services.
And also, to answer to Gino, our trade office has a manual on how to create a company in Canada. I will send you that link. We are also transitioning our web page, and it should be also in Promperu-Canada.com. In the Q&A, and in the frequently asked, thank you, Antonio. That document is there, so you can check in our web page how to create a company in Canada. Okay, but as Manny said, it's not an obligation to you if you want to participate in public biddings if that bid is under the umbrella of the trade agreement. Okay,
that's correct.
And there is another question that Gino is asking is RFQs processes are based on different Incoterms 2020, or in all the cases we need to quote our product considering the cost up to Canada?
Just reading that question too. RFQ processes are based on different, what's Incoterms 2020? Can you read the question again, Aldo?
You can read it in the chat room.
Yeah, I'm not understanding what Incoterms 2020, or in all cases we need to quote our product considering the cost up to Canada.
Perhaps Jimena, you can unmute Gino so he can clarify the question.
Sure.
Gino, once you are unmute, you can go ahead and clarify the question. The Incoterms is the FOB, C&F, those terms, selling terms for international trading.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with those. I don't know if Valerie is aware of those. RFQs, as I mentioned, request for quotation is based on price. Certain terms and conditions would be provided within the opportunity that dictate what's going to be used to assess who may be qualified. And then from there, price would be the determining factor and be awarded that contract. But
Yeah.
go ahead, Gino, if I don't know.
Gino here, perhaps he can clarify the
Sure,
question.
sure.
Yes, thanks for your attention. Yes, the idea is when you buy something in another country, you ask for specific conditions, as you mentioned, the requirements. And one of the requirements is the place that you expect to receive the product or the service.
Okay.
If you expect to receive it of course, it's in Canada, the place you expect to receive it, but the price changes if you, like in an international trade, you deliver or you have the liability up to Peru, up to the moment you deliver the products in the aircraft or in the vessel, or
Sure. Yeah.
deliver the products in your office, for example.
So
the price change, of course, depending on this.
Yeah.
That's why
so,
my question is, which is the base Incoterm you companies or government, Canada government usually use? I imagine it's supposed to use one which is in your country, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Like I said, that would be a better suited question for one of our procurement officers. But everything that you would be responding to would be included in any of the requests for quotations or whatever method of supply. They would indicate to you what the terms were and what the cost would be associated. So in the document, it would say, you know, freight on board and taxes excluded or included, and you know, if there's any customs or duty charges, you know, that's separate. All of those would be included in the terms and conditions of the document itself. Yes.
Okay, so depends on the specific condition of that filing. That's
correct.
That's what I imagine. Thanks.
That's correct. Yes. Thanks for the question.
Thank you, Gino, and thank you.
And similar, excuse me, and also,
yes,
I think I imagine it happens the same with the method of payment. Depending on the RFQ, you are going to specify which is the method of payment you're going to use.
Absolutely. In most instances for Canadian tenders, it's in Canadian dollars. You know, there's terms and conditions that may be different, but again, the contracting authority, either for that department or public services on behalf of the client department, will determine all of the terms and conditions and stipulate them in the document so that anyone that's supplying or is looking to respond would know exactly what the terms and conditions were. Hope that answered your question. Yep.
Okay. Thank you, Gino, for the questions, and thank you, Manny, for the answers.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's no more questions now, so I would like to invite Anouk Bergeron, the Senior Trade Commissioner of Canada to Peru, for the closing remarks of this seminar. Welcome, Anouk.
Thank you, Aldo. Just a second, I'm just going to get organized here. Okay, thank you very much. I'll speak mainly in English, but just to start to facilitate the thing. So, vous le savez certainement, mais le Canada et le Pérou ont développé une excellente relation à travers le temps. In fact, we're talking about more than 75 years of bilateral relations. And this is a lifetime of collaboration in many international fora where we work together to advance our shared commitment to the multilateral system. We also share a dedication to sound macroeconomic policy frameworks and to trade liberalization, as demonstrated by our decade-old bilateral free trade agreement that we just talked about today. But that's not only it. We also participate in APEC and other regional trade initiatives, such as the CPTPP and the Pacific Alliance. We are also important trade partners, and we are working collaboratively to grow our bilateral trade and investment profiles to ensure greater prosperity for our people. And the numbers bear this out. Peru is actually the third most important destination for Canadian products in South America. And Peru is Canada's second largest investment destination. And on the other hand, Canada is Peru's 5th most important trade partner, export destination in the world. So this was really aided by the last decade of the free trade agreement and more recently, which I mentioned, like the work that we've been doing on CPTPP and within the Pacific Alliance. So the event today, we hope has contributed to this long-term and strategic objective, or will contribute, right, to this long-term and strategic objective we have in common, which is to grow our bilateral relationship. Of course, Canada's engagement with Peru is multifaceted, as you probably know already, and it goes beyond the collaboration we do on commercial interests. We are also great hemispheric allies, and we also are engaged in important regional discussions, including through the OES and the Lima Group, for example, on democratic governance and efforts to counter corruption. And we also work together to advance human rights, gender equality, and sustainable inclusive growth. So we also have an important bilateral assistance program in Peru, so in cooperation or development, if you want, that include projects that range from promoting economic diversification in rural zones to empowerment of marginalized youth and women and vulnerable communities, to modernization of the public service. We've also created a mechanism called expert deployment mechanism for trade and development. This mechanism provides technical assistance to help developing countries as they negotiate and or implement their trade and investment agreements with Canada. And we already have some projects within the context of this mechanism with key Peruvian institutions such as SENASA, MINCETUR, INDECOPI, to name a few. These projects will benefit Peru in many ways, and of course will advance our shared goal of inclusive and sustainable economic development. So today we heard about what Canada-Peru Free Trade Agreement means for our countries, but more specifically what it can mean to companies like yours with access to government procurement. More concretely, you know, we hope now that you understand better how you can tap into this world of opportunities. As much as we see these as great opportunities for Peruvian companies in Canada, we understand similar opportunities exist in Peru for Canadian companies. And as the head of the Canadian Trade Commissioner Service in Peru, I hope to be able to organize in the coming months a seminar for Canadian companies to pursue similar opportunities in Peru within the context of the FTA chapter on government procurement. So that would sort of complete the cycle. So I would like to thank very much from Peru, and in particular Sex Toronto, Aldo, and your team for this great initiative, as well as my colleagues in Canada from Global Affairs Canada, Valérie, and from Public Services and Procurement Canada, Manny and his team as well. So thank you also to all of you for being with us today. I really firmly believe that this is through practical sessions like this one that we will bring more companies to benefit from our FTA. Merci beaucoup. Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Anouk, and count on that. We will do that seminar to Canadian companies within the second semester of this year. Thank you to our speakers, Valerie and Manny, for this very comprehensive information, and for the Promperu team in Peru, or the Promperu team in Canada. And I look forward to continue supporting businesses between Canada and Peru. Thank you very much. And this is recorded, and it will be sent to all the assistants and people that registered to the seminar. Thank you. Bye.